You have never met them. You have never spoken to them. You never signed a single contract with them. And yet, right now, 3 companies you didn't choose are keeping a secret file on your entire life. Every loan you've ever taken, every credit card you've ever owned, every payment you've ever missed, it's all in there. In a file you never opened, about the one person you thought only you could truly see. You. And from that file they calculate a number. Just 3 digits, somewhere between 300 and 850. A number most people never think about, until the single day it quietly decides whether they get a home, a car, a business, sometimes even a job. You didn't apply for this number, you can't cancel it, and you are not allowed to see how it is made. This is the story of the most powerful industry you've never heard of. How 3 companies turned your reputation into a product they sell, and how one secret formula became the silent judge of your entire financial life. This is your secret score. Picture this. You walk into a bank to ask for a loan. You're dressed well, you're polite, you explain your plan. And within a few seconds, before you've barely finished talking, the answer is already decided. Not by the person sitting in front of you, by a number on their screen. So who really decides if you can be trusted with money? You might think it's your bank, but the bank is just reading a report. And that report was written by one of 3 companies: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You have probably never done business with any of them directly, but they have been doing business with you for years. Every time you open a credit card, take out a loan, or sign a phone contract, that lender quietly sends your details to these 3. When you pay on time, they know. When you fall behind, they know that too. They take all of it, decades of your financial behavior, and they build a file, a profile of exactly how you handle money. And here is the part that catches people off guard. You were never asked, there was no sign up, no I agree button. You became their product the moment you borrowed your very first dollar, because that is the business. You are not their customer, the banks are. These 3 companies gather everything they can about you, and then sell it straight back to the people deciding your future, your whole reputation, packaged up and sold over and over again, and you never see a single cent. But to understand how just 3 companies gained this much power over your life, we have to go back. Long before the internet, long before the credit card even existed, back to a time when your reputation was written down by a stranger with a notebook and a great many opinions. The year is 1841. A merchant named Lewis Tappan has a problem. He sells goods to shopkeepers all across America, usually on credit, and he has no reliable way of knowing which of them will ever pay him back. So he builds something new, a network of correspondents in towns across the country who secretly report back on the local business owners. Are they honest? Are they drinking? Are they good for the money? Tappan collects these whispers into ledgers and sells them to anyone who wants to know whether a stranger can be trusted. Without fully realizing it, he has just invented the credit report. And his little agency would one day grow into a giant whose name still survives today, Dun & Bradstreet. But Tappan's files were about businesses. The truly personal spying was still to come. For that, we travel south to Atlanta in the year 1899, where 2 brothers launch a company with an innocent-sounding name, the Retail Credit Company. At first, they simply record which customers pay their shop bills on time, but the files grow and grow. Investigators spread out across entire neighborhoods, knocking on doors, chatting with neighbors, and quietly writing down everything they hear. And not just whether you paid your debts, whether you drank, whether your marriage was falling apart, your politics, your rumored affairs, even your private life behind closed doors. Think about that for a moment. A private company building a file on your most intimate secrets based on gossip from people down the street, and you had no idea it was even happening. By the middle of the 20th century, this single company held secret files on millions of Americans, files stuffed with judgment, rumor, and pure hearsay, sold quietly to insurers and lenders who used them to decide your fate. A single whispered lie from a neighbor could cost you a loan, a job, or your good name, and you would never even know why. Nobody was watching the watchers. Until at last, someone in Washington began to ask what exactly was written inside all of those folders. By the late 1960s, the secret was starting to leak. Journalists and lawmakers were discovering that hidden companies held detailed dossiers on ordinary people, full of errors, rumors, and things you were never allowed to see. Americans were being turned down for loans, insurance, and jobs, and nobody would tell them why. The outrage grew, and in the year 1970, the government finally stepped in with a landmark law, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. For the first time, you had the right to see what was in your file, the right to challenge its mistakes, and the companies now had rules they were forced to follow. The reaction was revealing. The retail credit company, the one that had spent half a century cataloging people's private lives, now carried a name so toxic that in the year 1975 it wiped the slate clean. It rebranded itself with a cool, modern, forgettable name, Equifax, and it was not alone. A company called TRW, better known for building spacecraft, had a data division that would later be spun off and renamed Experian. And a business that began by leasing railroad cars, founded in 1968, moved into the very same industry and became TransUnion. 3 companies, all racing to digitize their files, go national, and turn your life into neat rows of data. And once it was digital, it became permanent. They no longer just knew your debts. They had compressed you into a profile that could be summoned in seconds, from anywhere in the country. But one problem still remained. Even with all of this data, the 3 giants couldn't quite agree on one simple question. How risky exactly are you? The answer would come from 2 men, and a single secret formula that would end up ruling us all. Rewind to the year 1956. An engineer named Bill Fair and a mathematician named Earl Isaac share a radical idea. What if you could predict whether someone will repay a loan, not with a banker's gut feeling, but with pure mathematics, cold, consistent, unemotional. The exact same rules for everyone. They found a company, Fair, Isaac and Company, and for years the world mostly ignored them. Then, in the year 1989, everything changed. Working hand in hand with the credit bureaus, they launched a single universal score. They took your entire financial life and crushed it down into one number, between 300 and 850. They called it the FICO score, and it quietly took over the world. Today, that one little number is used in roughly 90% of lending decisions in America. It sets the interest rate on your mortgage, which can mean tens of thousands of dollars, won or lost, over your lifetime. It decides your car loan, whether you get the apartment, your insurance premium, sometimes whether you even get the job. So how is it calculated? They will happily tell you the ingredients. Your payment history, around 35%. How much you currently owe, about 30%. The length of your credit history, 15%. And new credit, plus the mix of accounts you hold, the final 10% each. But the exact recipe, how all of it is weighed, blended and combined, that is a closely guarded secret. A formula locked away in a vault, like the recipe for a famous soft drink. You live your entire financial life by its rules, and yet you are never, ever allowed to read them. And here is what makes it so powerful. It feels fair, it's just math, right? No human bias, no bad mood, no prejudice, but that number can only judge you on the data it is fed. And if that data is wrong, or the system was simply never built for someone like you, the math doesn't care. It just delivers its verdict, and everyone trusts it completely. The bureaus, hungry for a piece of that power themselves, later teamed up to launch a rival score of their own, called VantageScore. But the game was already decided. a handful of digits, produced by formulas no ordinary person is allowed to see, now stood at the gate of almost every major door in your life. And then, in the year 2017, one of the three giants did the unthinkable. It lost the files. In the year 2017, Equifax, one of the three companies trusted to guard the most sensitive information in your life, was hacked. And this was not some small, forgettable leak. The private records of around 147 million Americans were exposed: names, dates of birth, home addresses, and social security numbers, the master key to a person's entire financial identity. And here is the infuriating part. It didn't have to happen. The attacker slipped in through a known weakness in the company's software, a hole that a fix already existed for, weeks before the attack. They simply hadn't installed it. And it gets darker still. In the days after the company discovered the breach, but before it warned the public, several of its executives sold off their own company stock, while millions of ordinary people were still completely in the dark about the danger closing in around them. Eventually, Equifax agreed to a settlement worth up to around $700 million. It sounds like a crushing punishment. But step back and remember one thing. You were never Equifax customer. You never chose them. They gathered your data without ever asking. They failed to protect it. And when it all fell apart, most affected people walked away with a few dollars or some free credit monitoring, frequently sold by the very same industry that failed them. Which leads us to the most uncomfortable truth of all. You cannot opt out. There is no unsubscribe button. There is no delete my account. As long as you take part in modern life, a bank account, a card, a loan, your file is being written whether you like it or not. You are enrolled in a system you never joined, and you can never leave. And that file is not always right. Studies have found that roughly 1 in 5 credit reports contains an error, and some of those mistakes are serious enough to raise the cost of your loans, or to get you rejected outright. For something you're not even allowed to see clearly, that is a terrifying margin for error. A stranger's typo can quietly reshape your entire future. Then comes the final irony. To keep an eye on the file these companies hold about you. The file you never agreed to. You are often expected to pay them. You buy monitoring of their file about your own life. They took your data for free, and then they found a way to sell it back to you. And this is no longer just an American story. The very same companies and the very same scoring logic have quietly spread across dozens of countries around the world. A silent judge exported everywhere. Now comes the newest chapter: artificial intelligence. A fresh generation of algorithms is beginning to feed on what's called alternative data. Your rent, your utility bills, your shopping habits, your entire digital footprint, to score you in ways the old systems never could. More data, more power, and even less transparency than before. So think carefully about where this is heading. A number you are not allowed to see, built by a formula you are not allowed to read, owned by companies you never chose, quietly deciding what your life is worth. You never signed up, you can't opt out, and you will never see the formula. But it sees you, all of you, and somewhere, right now, in a file you never opened, 3 quiet digits are still deciding what your future is worth. If this changed the way you see that little number, stick around. Because the people who understand these hidden systems are the ones who learn how to beat them. I'll see you in the next one.